Hi, welcome to another virtual exploration. I'm John Williams. This is my photographer John. This is my technical expert John. And we're going to get things buttoned up here and go explore a trail near Hood Canal. You might hear the rain out there. Hopefully, by the time we get there, the rain will be stopped. See you there. Our preparations are now behind. Let's go down the trail, see what we find. Here we are at the trailhead. I'm going to try an experiment today. I'm going to photograph the beginning of this section of trail. Then as we go down the trail, I'll photograph some of the things we see. Then I'll stop, photograph the beginning of another section of trail. Then photograph some of the things we see along that section. And repeat that till we get to the end of the trail. Let's see how it works out. Can you tell that it's autumn? The big leaf maple trees are adding their colorful presence on and around the trail. Here's an example of how multiple maple trunks grow together, often because their parent tree met its demise, but enough of the stump was left to allow new growth. See this old decaying stump along the trail? I'll put my phone on it to give a sense of scale. And what do you know? In the phone, you can see an image of me photographing the phone. Do you know what this is? It's a large Douglas fir. It's hard to tell how big it is in a photo, so I've included my hand for a sense of scale. Now how about my foot? That's a little better. It allows me to get further away with the camera. I'll keep experimenting with ways to convey the scale of things. Well, we found some interesting things along that section of trail. Now this section is interesting because it begins with a gateway formed by trees. The tree on the right actually has two trunks and a combined and interesting looking root formation. Perhaps this tree, or these trees, started growing on a nurse log, and the nurse log rotted away, leaving its shape in the roots. Our next milestone is now behind. Let's go down the trail, see what we find. Here's another really large tree. My foot just isn't big enough to really convey the size of the tree. Let's try something else. There. I got my photographer to stand by the tree with me. I wonder how old it is. Let's look for clues as we go down the trail. Here are some broken branches laid across the trail. This is a low spot in the trail, and these branches make it possible to get a little bit less muddy when crossing this low spot after wet weather. Do you see that weird bend in the further of these two trees? Let's take a closer look from the other side. I don't really know what caused that tree to bend like that. Maybe another tree fell against it while it was still young. I did even see some mushrooms, though not many, despite the fact that it's that time of year, and it had been raining quite a bit recently. And I found a bench, so let's call this the beginning of the next segment of trail. Our next milestone is now behind. Let's go down the trail, see what we find. Here's another large old tree. Again, I got my photographer to pose with it to provide a sense of scale. I found a spot where I could see downhill through the trees, and there's a major road not too far away. That's what's been adding a lot of background noise as I've been chatting with the camera from the trail. And for some reason, not all trees grow straight up. I have no idea what caused this arch, but it certainly did stand out as a unique sight along the trail. And here's a huckleberry plant with a berry still sitting there. Sometimes trees fall, and this one fell across the trail. I came back a few days later and that tree had been cut to open up the trail. The log was less than 2 feet across, but I counted 150 rings. Many of them were really close together. Maybe it was pretty crowded around this tree much of its life, so it didn't grow very fast. Here's another bench. It's really noisy right here, but we'll call this bench the beginning of the next segment of the trail. And look what's behind the bench. We got some salal. Our next milestone is now behind. Let's go down the trail, see what we find. It's really nice to see some big trees here. I don't have any idea how old this one is, but I've seen 80-year-old trees this big, yet the log we just looked at was much smaller and about 150 years old. But I think that these are all just youngsters compared to the trees originally here. And nearby also is some Oregon grape, a little bit reminiscent of holly, but not really. And speaking of holly, there's also some holly here along the trail. Here I'm holding it in front of the salal. Why are there so many different plants here, while earlier on the trail the short plants were mainly ferns? These understory plants are thriving because in this area the trees are fairly young, and the canopy above us still allows considerable sunlight to come in. This is a typical branch of a Douglas fir tree. This branch must have broken in a recent windstorm and was lying next to the path. And here's part of a tree that had fallen across the path quite some time ago, and someone cut it to clear the path. You can see that the cut had been aging for a while. Judging from the rings, it was about 70 years old, and after about 20 years, it started growing slower and slower. After about 40 years, it was growing so slowly that the rings are almost indistinguishable. Here's a stump that's about the same diameter as some of those big trees we saw. This close-up of the stump shows the rings, and my quick approximate count yielded about 80 annual rings. The trail was pretty clearly defined, but in one place I did see the shadows of a hole in the underbrush. What is this? Getting a little closer, it looks like an animal trail, cleared along the ground, but overgrown about a foot off the ground. So maybe calling it an animal tunnel might be more accurate. As I got to where the trail ended, near a campground, I found evidence that there had been another nature explorer here. Unfortunately, the explorer lost their magnifying glass. Here we are at the end of the trail. Leaf blower noises. That's the end of this trail. I hope you've enjoyed this brief trail tour.